Keys on the table. He kept his keys on the table like a promise he thought could hold its liquor. My name is Marco. I was the one who cooked, the one who called the super about the radiator, the one who knew how to stop a glass from breaking by not buying the cheap set. He was Julian, who took photos for magazines that pretended to be about furniture, but were about the lives people wished they had inside of it. We lived on the third floor of a building that taught you to forgive stares and to watch your step with people who smiled easily. We did ordinary well enough to brag about it. Our friends said we were what happens when men decide not to be brave in the wrong ways. I taught piano part-time, which is to say I taught patience to hands. He traveled 2 weeks out of every month to shoot rooms with more light than history. We wrote rules on an index card taped to the fridge because ambition requires guardrails. We said no afters without names and minutes. We said compliments open no doors. We said hands belong to what they're holding. We said these things at the sink, rinsing dishes until they decided to believe us. The work that broke us arrived in a portfolio like a dare. An interior designer named Etienne shot me a message through a mutual friend. He needed a set dresser for a magazine feature, someone who could make rooms look like they meant what they were saying. Julian said yes before asking me. Etienne's clients were the kind who treat their pets like heirs. He wore clothes that cost more than our rent and asked for water like he was ordering forgiveness. The first time I met him, he smiled with the carefulness of people who bring knives to picnics. There are people who flirt like they're doing you a favor, and people who flirt like they're doing their homework. Etienne flirted like he was about to grade us both. He put his hand on Julian's shoulder during a test shot and left it there long enough to grow a thought. He looked at me when he laughed. He laughed often. The shoot was at a townhouse that had opinions about light. Julian worked like a man who trusted his eyes more than he trusted luck. Etienne arranged books that had never been read in ways that suggested someone had been brave here once. I fluffed cushions and pretended not to notice how bodies behave when rooms tell them it's okay to misbehave. After, Etienne said we should all get a drink to celebrate light doing what it was told. At the bar, he touched Julian's wrist to make a point about color grading. I wanted to pour my beer on his hand. I sipped instead. Julian started coming home with new weather. He would describe the way a staircase mourned its intentions. He would talk about light as if it forgave him. He put his keys on the table and asked what I wanted for dinner in a voice that had learned humility somewhere I didn't live. We had sex one night like we were trying to teach the bed to behave. He pressed me against the wall by the piano and told me to be quiet for the neighbors. I told him to be quiet for me. In the morning, I found a corner of our sheet tucked under the couch like it had tried to escape. The second intrigue arrived disguised as friendship. I met a man named Rafa at the studio where I taught. He was a dancer in a touring company with knees that believed in compromise. He stayed after class to ask about Debussy and left his water bottle behind on purpose. We started meeting for coffee before his rehearsal and my students. He listened with his eyes, not the kind of listening people pretend to do while waiting for their turn, but the kind that made me feel like he was taking dictation from my face. I told him about Etienne. He told me about the time love turned his apartment into a museum and then charged admission. He didn't touch me. He gave me the impression of touch, which is worse. One morning, Julian texted me a photo of a hotel room he said was ugly in a way he wanted to forgive. I looked at the bedspread and decided it might be unforgivable. He said he'd be gone one more day. That night, I found an earring on the bathroom sink. It was not mine. It was not his. It was small and brave. I took a picture and sent it to him. He replied with a joke about prop styling. I went to Rafa's apartment and looked at his couch like a forecast. We didn't kiss. That is how people tell themselves they're ethical. We sat close enough for the room to audition a rumor. He asked if Julian was good at apology. I said Julian thought apology was a way of making a narrative feel earned. Rafa laughed. "We are talented animals," he said, and I wanted him to be wrong. Julian came home on a Thursday with the hum of new stories. He reached for me in a way that used to be apology and now was inventory. We had sex in the shower because he said he missed me, and I said I didn't want to drown. He put his mouth where I keep doubt, and it did what water does when it needs to be believed. After, he whispered thank you in the register I use for Bach. I wiped steam off the mirror and pretended not to notice how the glass refused to fog where a body had refused to lie. Etienne invited us to a party at his studio, all white and hunger. It was the kind of night where people practice being photographed. Julian wore a new shirt that looked like a decision. I wore the same jacket I always wear when I don't want anyone to think I'm auditioning. In a corner near the windows, Etienne told a story about a sofa and then touched Julian's lower back as if punctuation. I watched and felt nothing for 1 second and then felt everything like an instrument. Rafa texted me a question without a question mark. "Are you okay?" I left the party and went to him like a person pretending the city is small. He opened the door with a face that had learned to be careful for other people. He poured wine and stood without touching me because he wanted me to decide. I decided to be stupid in ways that would hurt and heal. I put my mouth on his collarbone, and he made a sound that made me forget the name I had for the part of me that didn't do this. He said my name in a voice that made it a noun and then a verb. We didn't undress like strangers. We undressed like friends who had remembered they were animals. After, he asked if I loved Julian. I said yes because there are truths you can't resize. He asked if Julian loved me. I said I think so, which is the kind of danger you hand someone when you want them to be more than temporary. He asked if I wanted to stay, and I said I wanted to be brave in the right way. He took a breath like a man who just lost a role. I left before his couch could teach me how to stay. I told Julian the next morning because the kitchen needed new air. I told him before coffee because I wanted the sentence to live in a clean cup. He put his hands on the table next to his keys like he needed the weight. He asked for details in the voice people use when they're trying to decide whether or not to be generous. I told him the kind of details you tell when you want to both hurt and be forgiven. He cried without performing. He asked if I was leaving. I said I wanted to be left only by versions of myself I didn't respect. He laughed. It made something inside our apartment sit down. We tried what people call open because the alternative sounded like a resignation letter. We said if you're going to break a rule, do it where I can see you. We said if you're going to touch someone, keep our names clean. We said if you're going to lie, do it in a way that embarrasses you. It worked the way umbrellas work. Useful, insufficient, better than drowning. Julian told Etienne they were done in a message that said respect in all lowercase. Etienne sent back a photo of light on a wall and the word exquisite, not as a compliment but as a species of threat. I kept seeing Rafa in ways that made us honest. He taught me how to be kind to my own body by asking it questions. Sometimes we had sex that felt like making a room habitable. Sometimes we only lay there until my name learned to be a verb again. He didn't ask me to leave anyone. He asked me to learn the study of staying. Julian and I stopped pretending the keys on the table were indifferent. We kept our hands on what they were holding until they learned to trust us again. At night, I would sit at the piano and play something slow. He would lean on the instrument like he believed wood had mercy. We made love with the lights off because I wanted to be less interesting and more true. He whispered the things I hadn't asked him to say. I love you in the tone you use to state facts rather than salvage anything. He found the earring in a drawer in November, and we laughed at ourselves for letting a prop pretend to be a verdict. He threw it away without ceremony. I kissed him with the small hunger I now trusted. We went to Rafa's performance and clapped in a way that said we meant it, and also go home with yourself tonight. Sometimes intrigue doesn't ruin a life, it refreshes its grammar. We stopped being brave in the wrong ways. Etienne sent a postcard from a city that had substance, and we didn't answer because not answering is a sentence too. The basil survived winter because we had learned how to water again. The index card on the fridge got smudged from fingers that had become more useful than decorative. If you came over now, you'd see a bowl for keys that doesn't panic. You'd see a piano with a slight stain where we leaned too hard one night. You'd see two men who write each other notes on receipts because paper is the only witness we can afford. Sometimes Rafa sleeps over on the couch when our apartment needs to remember how to be generous. He looks at the ceiling like a man attending a service, and in the morning we feed him too. Julian makes coffee. I make eggs. We don't apologize for not pretending. This is a different story. When people ask me how we survived, I tell them the truth that adult men hide from each other. We talked until we were too honest to be interesting. We didn't change the locks because keys are not vows. We made a room at the table for the things we did wrong and the people we didn't keep. We kissed with the lights off and sometimes on. We took down a photograph that made our wall try too hard. He still puts his keys on the table. They sound lighter now. When he reaches for me, I don't ask questions I already know the answers to. When I reach for him, he meets me like a person who intends to stay mistaken in ways we can repair. And on nights when I sit at the piano and play something slow, he stands there and listens. The room doesn't judge. The basil pretends to understand. This is the best we could have done. It's better than the story where nothing broke. It's the story where we learned how to hold what we couldn't keep from dropping.